Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to another episode of the OpenShift Container Storage Office Hours here on OpenShift TV. I am Chris Short, executive producer of OpenShift TV and a technical marketer here at Red Hat. I am joined by the one and only Chris Blum, almost messed up, live from Germany, where he has had to dig through the bowels of his house to get some cable running to make this stream work this morning. So thank you very much, Chris, for doing that.
Sure, and I'm Chris Blum. I'm a senior architect in Storage BU, and I got to play around with technology all day long to make your life with OCS even more pleasant.
More pleasant lives are good, yes.
Pleasant lives are good. Right. And with this office hour, we're trying to teach Chris Short and you as a viewer how to use OCS and why it's a good thing and how to get even more out of it.
Awesome. Sounds great, man.
So for this episode, we agreed that we're going to talk a little bit about backup and what we here in Red Hat call OADP, which is the OpenShift Application Data Protection Operator.
Oh, well, I put the title wrong or whatever, because I thought it was, what did I put it as? OpenShift APIs for data protection. Same thing, right?
Almost.
Okay.
I sent you the link so you can put it in the chat if you want.
Perfect. Oh, okay. There's the operator link itself. Got it. Boom. All right. So yeah, show me the operator. Nothing but the operator. So help me, operator.
So yeah, like OADP, that's a lot of different things. There's the OADP operator, which is the operator you can get from Operator Hub, which will use the API. So the heading isn't really wrong per se. It's just kind of what we're talking about.
We're using the APIs, not talking about the APIs, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole idea behind OADP is that a lot of people asked us, hey, it's good that I have my persistence in the cluster, but what if disaster strikes? And then we want to keep our data. We want to keep the persistence. And for that, you usually have backup recovery. And we know that our competitors have been quite busy at implementing their own things, but Red Hat being Red Hat and Red Hat being open, we actually behind the scenes worked on something that follows that approach of being open, and we developed the OADP, so the APIs, which any backup vendor can integrate with, and just back up the persistent data we have stored in OCS.
This is cool. I appreciate that there's a very well done README on this GitHub repo.
Yeah, exactly. So I recommend that you follow the operator link. It gives you a nice little screenshots of how this install workflow would look like, how you get that, and how we'd use that. In the backend, it's actually rather simple. So we are using the community Velero bits to do the backup, and then all those backup vendors can integrate with that, and they can use that to back up the OCS data somewhere, and they can use the same APIs to also restore the data back onto OCS disk.
So where would you typically store those data? Like where would you suggest people ship their backups to?
A lot of people are actually storing their data on object storage because it's very flexible and it can scale very far.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
So theoretically, you could reuse the multi-cloud gateway to send your backups somewhere else, and also put it on multiple clouds in the same way. And what you can also do is you can use something like the AWS S3, for example, to store it
Hmm.
outside of your OpenShift cluster. If you're already in AWS, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I like there's lots of places for block storage now, like B2. I mean, even DigitalOcean has a block storage thing now. So like the sky's the limit as far as offsite, backups. Do have you seen any customers like back up their data on premises and to some offsite thing, or is it always to offsite usually?
Well, the thing is that we don't observe anything. We don't have any secret agent installed with our
Well, I know
software.
that. Yeah.
We tell you that. Um, what what I would do is I would probably store it offsite somewhere.
Hmm.
I might send it to Amazon Glacier, for example, because that's super cheap.
That is
It
cheap.
takes a
Yeah.
long time to actually get that. Um, yeah, but yeah, for a backup, it's good.
Cool. So we got a question. Um, well, two questions. One I answered it in chat. The other is the one I'm going to ask you. If I already have a Velero instance running, can I reuse my existing Velero instance with this?
I don't think that's possible actually. So
Okay.
part of the OADP operator is that the operator has a CR for Velero installation,
Hmm.
and I don't think that would integrate very well with pre-existing. So you could run it side by side. You could kind of like look at your configuration of the Velero you already have, and then take over some things that are important for you, but I don't think that would necessarily work. If you
Yeah,
scroll
so
down
it would
to,
be like a migration process, right? Like you would set this up on, on the side over here, and it would become your new way of backing up, and you would phase your existing Valero thing out as you move things over to the OADP operator, right?
yeah, but what should work is that the backups you've already done with Velero in the past, you should be able to have that recognized by the new Velero, and then you can like you said, you migrate over to the new thing and keep using it just like before.
Awesome. Cool. So you want to kick the tires on this somehow, or what's next? What are you gonna do?
Well, um, one thing that's very important here is that that we've heard that our customers said we need something like this. We know that the competitors had this, and OCS was lacking this since we've released the OCS full version for that too. And what's important is to remember that we've listened to our customers and we've done this, and we've done it in a way that might have taken us a little bit longer, but we've tried to do it in a way so that we don't have this this vendor lock-in that you see with other vendors,
Hmm.
really. And this should just underline how we try to position OCS to be something that's actually useful for you, and that's not something that puts you in a corner somewhere or down the road. And yeah, it's all open. It all works. And if you like the OADP operator, then you will be pleased to know that this is currently a community effort, but we have plans to invest a lot of time from people like me and my team, and also engineering time to actually build this out as a full-fledged solution in the next about 6 months. So we will see that OADP currently works, and it's all great, but we want to position that in a way so that we can say which vendors we have tried with OADP and that work beautifully with OCS, so that there's no sudden surprises for you, because that's usually what happens, right? You have all these vendors and they say we implemented OADP protocol, but then you try to upgrade your cluster, and then things things get out of hand. But yeah, we are going to, well, you could say certify those vendors for OCS and for certain OCS versions, so that you can see in advance if your favorite backup vendor is fully supported in OCS and what kind of features are supported for that backup vendor.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about that. Those not everything is like S3 compliant in the block storage world. So yeah, we would have to certify endpoints, for lack of a better term, as we productize this. That's a good point. Do you know, like,
And there will be also different tiers, like what we're currently discussing. But that's not something that's strictly fixed yet. But
right?
there will be different tiers where we can say, okay, this backup vendor, for example, only supports CSI snapshots, and that's pretty basic. And
Mm-hmm.
then there will be another tier where they fully support all of OADP, and maybe another tier where they also support backing onto an external RCS that you have somewhere else.
That's what. Yeah, that was my next question. What? Yeah, if I had like a DR location, or I was running like just a backup colo or whatever, I would assume you could then just pass this straight across your VPN link if you wanted to that other OCS cluster somewhere.
Yeah, that's actually going to be also a very important piece what we're working on in the next half year, or maybe even beyond that, is not only DR in a sense of backup and recovery, but also DR in a sense of site to site. So what you just described as an active and a passive side, where you have two OpenShift clusters and you want to be able to fail over to the other cluster seamlessly. And the great thing here, and I've said that almost in every show, is that Ceph already has that capabilities built in. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to have hundreds of engineers sit down and implement that and then have months of testing. We already have that. People are already actively using that for RBD, for example.
Right.
And we have that for OpenStack, and we just copy it over for OpenShift and keep reusing it. And we know that people have relied on this, and it has worked before. So even though OpenShift this is all pretty new, we can rely on the experience of years and years of this feature being there.
Yeah, it's the power of open source, man. That's pretty awesome. So there was a question in chat, and I pasted a link to our Catacoda site and all the courses and so forth. But if someone's new to OpenShift technology and they want to learn how to use it better, what is your recommended course, right? Like, where do you send people when they ask you, like, hey, I need to figure all this stuff out? Putting you on the spot, as it were.
No, I'm just thinking if there's a better place than Katakoda.
Right. I mean, we have some ebooks and stuff that are handy, but I'm trying to think of other places for this questioning person that wants to know more.
Yeah, I've seen that people learn in different ways. Like I'm someone who tries to tinker around with stuff, and then I learn from my mistakes. Sometimes things break and I have to rebuild it, and then
Story of my
I
life.
learn how I broke it, and that's how I can keep myself motivated, because I just rebuild it, break it, and rebuild it. But a lot of people that don't like that. There are people that love reading documentation, and they can read books about things, and then they know everything there is. And there are also people that enjoy watching videos, and then they see other people play with it, and then they learn through that. But for the first group that is like me, break, rebuild, Katakoda is probably a good resource.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've noticed that the OCS Katacoda scenarios are currently broken. I'm working on fixing that, but yeah, I need to get some help from the Katacoda people, and they appear to be still on vacation.
Well, people are allowed to take a vacation.
People are allowed to take a vacation.
It's been kind of a rough new year here in the U.S. if they're U.S. based too, by the way.
Yeah, that's fine. So just so you know, the OCS scenarios are currently appearing to not work. But there are other experiences that you can take, and they don't depend on each other. So whatever you want, the basic OpenShift things. There's also I think it's called Toolbox, where you can just get a bare OpenShift cluster and you can play around with it. So for the other category that likes to read, if you have a redhat.com, like an active redhat.com account, check out the documentation. If you don't have an account, then check out Red Hat Developer, where you get a free account to play around with the Red Hat software. And that should also give you access to the documentation. Now, that's a really good resource. And I can speak out the storage documentation. We put a lot of effort into making these documentation really good. Yeah, developers.redhat.com is where you get your account. Docs.redhat.com is where you get the Red Hat documentation. And there's a short link, docs.openshift.com, where you get access to the OpenShift documentation.
Right.
And for the people that like to watch videos, then the obvious choice is our Red Hat YouTube channel.
Yes, which I can drop a link to as soon as I remember the abbreviation. Yeah, RH OpenShift. Here we go. Yeah, so I mean, we've been doing these OpenShift container storage office hours for a while now. So there's an archive of those to go through, but there's all matters of things we've done on OpenShift TV, everything from GitOps to, just basic how to install a cluster in, XYZ scenario. So go through our archives there on YouTube, and you will find a bevy of educational resources that will hopefully answer your questions. And if you have any, specific topics that you'd like to have covered, feel free to reach out and let me know. I'm cshort@redhat.com and at Chris Short on Twitter. Let me know what you want us to cover, and we'll definitely have our ears open for that.
Yeah, definitely check out the GitOps because it's made by another Chris. No, but it's also a really good topic.
It is very true. If you want to use Argo CD or GitOps, I think GitOps is the implementation, is like the actual process of DevOps. So that's why it's when you adopt GitOps, you're kind of adopting DevOps without realizing it. So I really enjoy that aspect of it. And I will get a link straight to that playlist for you in just a second, as soon as I find it, because they all move around also very often. There we go. All right. That's the GitOps playlist that I just dropped in chat there. What else you got for us, buddy?
Well, we can go back to the backend recovery, right?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Unfortunately, I expected that a lot more people would ask a lot more questions, but I guess they're all sitting back and relaxing and enjoying the show. So enjoy your popcorn or your coffee, whatever you're snacking. I don't really have, and that's why I don't really have anything prepared that we can just try out right now. And I think your cluster is also not ready, right, Chris?
My cluster does not have OCS installed on it. No, I've got to go fix the rotational disk thing.
You're still on that.
Well, no. I turned it off over the holidays, right, just to save electricity, and basically that kaputs the whole cluster after 2.5 weeks of being off. So the rebuild started on Monday, and I just haven't had time to get to all the bits and pieces yet.
Yeah. So, anyways, with the OADP, there's when you go to the operator link, there's a link for a YouTube video where it's almost an hour long, but it's very informative. Where Annette Clavette, one of my colleagues, is there. But also we have a lot of engineering resources that are discussing the backend of OADP and what you can do with it. And that's quite nice because you can see all those slides and how everything's hooked into each other. And especially if you already have experience with Velero, then that should be pretty nice for you.
Oh, okay. Question in chat here. I heard a term mentioned at the top of the call, multi-cloud gateway. Where's the best path to read about it?
Well, if you want to read about it, then documentation is a great place. Also, I'm very happy, and I wanted to announce it in the end, but we can also say here, next time around, so in 2 weeks, Michelle De Palma, my colleague, will be on air with Chris Short, and she will talk about everything object, and everything object includes a multi-cloud gateway. So OCS comes with a multi-cloud gateway,
Right.
and that is our gateway to interface with multiple cloud object storages in the backend. So it can interface with the OCS Radius gateway from Ceph that's built in, but it can also talk to AWS S3 or Azure or anything like that. And then you have one endpoint with a bucket, and you can configure how that bucket reacts to incoming objects. And it can automatically send that to multiple backends, like have one copy written to the local Radius gateway and one offsite to your AWS S3. It can do deduplication, and it does encryption by default, all that stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. And you can configure it on a bucket level so that you can say, I have an application and that needs to be really secure and it uses bucket A. And then you have another application that's creating backups, for example, and that has bucket B. And bucket B does the duplication. It's very slow. It sends the data offside, but only replica one and all that stuff. And you can configure that with the multi-cloud gateway. And the multi-cloud gateway also supports our object bucket claims, so the OBCs, where you can programmatically request for buckets. So, yeah.
That's cool. So yeah, I dropped a couple links in there for our question asker. I forget the name, John. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate your question, John. If there's anyone else on the call that has a question, fire away. Seriously, we're here to answer all the questions. John has a follow-up question. We have already talked about some of the variations of generic S3 API support. Is there a link to the S3 API call dictionary in multi-cloud gateway?
Not sure what you mean, John.
Not sure about that one. I mean, I know the S3 API is documented on the AWS sites, but yeah, I'm not sure what you're referring to exactly by that question.
Maybe what it means is which S3 API calls are implemented or understood by the multi-cloud. Let me see if we can get that link. That should be in the documentation. I'll just check that out briefly.
Yeah, and that's a very good question, John, because you're right. The S3 API is rather, I don't know, ever evolving, I guess is the right way to phrase it, right? Like they're constantly adding things to S3, it feels like.
Exactly.
Yeah, you were right. What, in other words, which S3 API calls does multi-cloud gateway support at its endpoint? Yeah. I just like the fact that it can go to multiple locations based off application. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's like it's just a middleman. It doesn't really store any data by itself. It's
Hmm.
just it gets data and then it's just doing
Ships it
things to
off.
it and
Yeah.
ships it off.
Nice.
And the multi-cloud thing, that's definitely helping people as well when they need data in multiple places.
Nice.
I'm still looking for that. I'm not sure if I can find it this on a short notice. Um,
No, it's fine. We can wait ever so patiently.
Thank you, Chris.
You're quite welcome. I can also help dig too, I guess. OpenShift Container Storage docs. I should have this page bookmarked somewhere. 4.2. No, 4.6, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it's I'll put it in our private chat. This is the link to the documentation.
Mm-hmm. And let's see. I'm looking for data protection. I will admit the searchability is kind of planning, managing container.
I think part of that is this link here. I'll just put it in a Twitch chat
Yeah,
here.
thank you.
That's part 5.4. It's the S3 operations that you can do on a namespace bucket. And it links to the AWS documentation as well, so you can check out how to exactly do this API call. I know that we support more than that, but that's like on the bucket operations, which is usually what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and if there's something not there, definitely give us the feedback. You know, if like there's something that's not listed here that we need to support, let us know because we can definitely work on that.
Yeah, and then sometimes there are requirements where people say, okay, the multi-cloud gateway is nice, but what I need is I don't need a middleman. I want to cut out the middleman and get the added
wholesale
latency.
prices. I mean, wait.
And I want to decrease the latency, get a really performant object storage, and then they can use the Rados gateway directly. And with the Rados gateway, you also have access to other S3 protocol options. Some are implemented by the multi-cloud gateway only, and then some are only implemented in the Rados gateway. But they're like closing up so that both support both.
Nice. That's encouraging. Cool. All right. Any more questions from the audience? Otherwise, this is going to be the shortest show in history.
No, we don't have to close shop.
Oh, okay. What you got? Something else?
Well, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit. What would you do with the OADP? Like you have your cluster. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I would want can it this is a good question. Can it back up VMs inside OpenShift virtualization?
Yeah, so coming back to VMs, what are VMs in OpenShift?
Yeah.
VMs in OpenShift is basically just a pod running a process, right? And this process is a QEMU, and QEMU has PVCs just like everything else. It's called a data volume in the whole VM space, but the data volume is then based on a PVC usually, and this PVC is the same as with any other pod as well. So we can just take that PVC and we can back it up with OADP. Yes, for sure.
Awesome. Cool.
But just for like a consistent backup, it would be perfect if the VM is paused or shut
Paused or
down.
whatever. Yeah,
You
sure.
get that, right?
Yeah.
It's
So, and
always the
then,
same.
and the next question would be like, oh, okay, I have these containers. They're, they get keys from like Let's Encrypt, for example. So let's say the data coming out of these containers, the containers themselves, I don't necessarily care about the secrets, right? Because I can always go get new certs or whatever. But I want to capture everything else, right? Can you say back these things up, but just don't back up the secrets for me? I don't really need them, kind of thing. Like they're the secrets are somewhat ephemeral to an extent, right?
Um, well, what the backups are doing is they're backing up the PVC, the persistent volume claims, or the persistent volumes behind the PVC.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't put those secrets into the folder inside of your container that's backed up by the PV,
Okay.
then they're ephemeral.
Cool.
And that's how it would do that. The cool thing about the backups is depending on what kind of backup vendor you're using, but sometimes you can even restore single items out of that. So you accidentally deleted a file and you can restore that file. That would be something that I would be really interested in, especially when we're talking about an RWX file store, which is shared between multiple containers.
Awesome. So Daniel Foley asks, you may have already answered this, but is OADP going to have its own subscription, or does it just come with your OpenShift subs?
So right now, OADP is just a community operator.
Right.
There's no productization behind it or anything. So you don't even need OpenShift subs for that.
Right. You could technically run it on a Kubernetes cluster running OLM, and you'll be off and running.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So,
no fee.
but then you don't get a support and all that.
Right. There's that, but yeah.
Theoretically, you can do that, and that should be okay for you.
Mm-hmm.
But the best way is to obviously have OADP with a storage that also supports the OADP calls, Velero and all of that correctly, so that that you don't have any problems. Because the worst thing you can have is backups that don't work. So
right. Yeah. Untested backups.
All that capacity, all that money to store your backups, and all that time to implement your backup cycle, and then suddenly they don't work. That would be awful.
Right. That would be terrible. So I'm just going to drop a link. There's a who wrote this? Alex Handy did, about Velero backup solutions in general, just to give people an idea, because it has some nice diagrams and such. But yeah, Velero is a CNCF project, is it not?
Yes, yeah, it's. I think it was integrated into CNCF, so it's a real community effort. There are a lot of companies behind it, and it's a nice project for the backup, and that's why we've integrated that into OADP. And Velero isn't new to Red Hat.
No, it's not new
because we've already had this integrated for our migration tool. If you remember the migration tool that we use for OpenShift 3 to 4 migrations, that's also based on Velero.
Right. So let's see. Project Velero, Velero.io. I'm trying to figure out if it's what level of CNCF, but that's kind of irrelevant to folks. But yeah, it's a well-supported project indeed. I'm pulling up the landscape here, which takes forever. It is. Doesn't say. So maybe it's not in the incubating sandboxy kind of way. I'm not sure. But I do know it is widely used across the Kubernetes community. For example, the repo has 4,000 plus stars on it and all that fun stuff. It even has its own Twitter account. How cute. Project Velero.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so you can follow Velero on Twitter if you want, and get all the news about it. You can also start the OADP operator, which is currently 7 stars. So there's still a little catch up to do to Velero.
Yeah, a little bit, I mean, but it's consuming Velero, right? Like you don't expect the projects that consume another project to have more stars unless it's really awesome.
Plus, it's a rather new initiative, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
It's understandable that people have to get to know it first. But yeah, for OADP, we were talking about how we would use it. And the other thing is that with OADP, you can also easily have backups that are container native. So it supports like what containers are associated with that backup, and you can back up a whole namespace, all the pods in your namespace, and or a whole cluster with that, and that helps with the manageability. And when you have that, you can also say, okay, I've backed up my whole cluster, but I only want to restore that single pod. And I know that for different storages and storage backups, that's sometimes a struggle if they weren't built with containers in mind.
Yeah, because it's just going to back up the whole freaking disk or block storage, whatever's backing storage it is.
Or you're backing up all the pods, and then what you end up with the PV ID, and then you kind of have to try to figure out again, okay, that's PV ID, what pod is consuming that?
Let's connect the dots here and figure out what did what, and hopefully your documentation is fantastic, which, I mean, to be honest with you, documenting pods in flight, it seems like a bad idea, right? I think it's kind of an anti-pattern. So yeah, it's good to have these projects around.
And it's point and click, right? It's also it's in Operator Hub. You install it. You have the CRs that set up Velero for you. We've had this question before where can I reuse my Velero? That's a difficult topic because that Velero is built in, and then it's point and click. You just plug there, and it's going to set up a Velero with the best practices for doing all the backup stuff for you.
Yeah, so potentially there's some checkboxes that it might check that you didn't do yourself with Velero when you were thinking about your backup strategy, right? Like this is a practiced, method of backing up resources within clusters for sure.
And it's not at a stage where we can say, even though it's a community effort, we've had a lot of Red Hat resources look into that and build it to the state where it is now. And it's not just something that someone tinkered around in their garage. It's something you can start to trust with for your backups. And that's a nice thing. It's well integrated, just like OCS. It just runs with the OpenShift cluster. You don't need to worry about anything. You don't need to relearn something, even though if you weren't too knowledgeable with OpenShift or storage in general, even a Chris Short could do this right now.
Now that's saying something. So easy, Chris Short can do it. When it comes to storage, that is saying a lot.
Maybe we should add this to our certification stuff. Like that's just easy.
Yeah.
But that would keep you busy.
Indeed. Yeah, once I get my cluster rebuilt and fully up and running, I will definitely be doing backups so I don't have to go through the process of resetting everything up again. So yes, as I learn more on this show, my own experiences get better with OpenShift. So yeah, it's pretty great.
And Another thing that I might want to add here is that the edge is becoming more and more important for OpenShift, and so we understand it as well.
Mm.
And with the new upcoming version OCS 4.6, we will also support in tech preview a couple of deployment modes that will enable you to deploy OCS in very small deployment sizes. So we will support clusters that only have 3 nodes, for example, that where you only have the master nodes. That also came out with the latest OpenShift version, where you have that workerless cluster, and it's very condensed. And now with the upcoming OCS version, you will be able to deploy OCS on that cluster as well. So it's all contained in 3 boxes.
Nice. I like that.
And we also, for regular use cases where you have more like 6 nodes, but people have complained, I don't have the resources to run OCS. I know that Chris Short also had to increase his VMs to run OCS. So we've also had that minimal mode where we're consuming minimal amount of resources, so that when you have a smaller cluster with less RAM or less CPU, you can run OCS on there nevertheless, and it should be fine. It's just not going to scale as well until you added the resources.
Right. I mean, when it comes to resource consumption, you get what you put in, right? So the time spent doing something and the resources that you need to do it go hand in hand.
Yeah, and we've also looking into the possibilities to have what we call a service disable mode, where you can say, okay, OCS has all these modules where you can have the shared file system, the multi-cloud gateway, the Rados gateway, and these are all different use cases usually. And sometimes we have people that don't need to use all of these at the same time. So we're looking into the possibility of how we can expose that to customers as well, so that they can actually disable some of these modules.
Nice.
And that's going to be quite interesting, because I know that people are kind of waiting for that. And yeah,
Cool.
that will also reduce the amount of required resources a bit.
Good. Always like that. Like the developer experience for OpenShift, I feel like, right? Like we do a lot to help there, but it's all resource bound, right? Like there's only so much you can do with a system that's designed to be massively scalable, right? So distributed computing in a small scale is kind of weird. Like it's not uncommon to need that, right? But it is an uncommon use case, right? Like I just need a small, massive cluster. A small, redundant, highly available cluster is like an oxymoron almost. But we still can do like 3-node clusters and things like that. So that's kind of nice.
Well, that's what a lot of people thought as well. But in the open, as I said in the very beginning, we listen to our customers, and there are actually a couple of customers out there in IT world that don't only have their big data centers, but they have their edge locations as well.
Yeah.
And then that might be an offsite office, or some offsite location where they're doing business. Sometimes they want to run their containers there too, and they need a platform they can run that on. And then sometimes that network connection isn't as reliable or as fast, so that it could do the persistence through the network to an offsite location. So they need local storage that eventually synchronizes with the mothership. And this is where we're looking in the future, how we can support that. Like OpenShift has these remote workers now. That's a definitely really interesting piece of technologies. If you don't know what that is, in a nutshell, you have your master somewhere in your data center and your workers on your edge location, somewhere where you need your containers, then these can communicate remotely. And the distance can be further away than with a regular deployment. You can have more latency between that. And so in your edge location, you don't need as much resources. Then you can have multiple edge locations. Like you said, it's massively scalable. But if in every single remote location, you only have a little bit of resources.
Right. I just dropped 2 links in the big master chat, and neither one of them came over to Twitch.
There it is.
There we go. That's because I'm putting them in manually. But yeah, there's the docs on how to use that. And this, the use case. I don't know if I've told the story on this show or not, right? But a company I used to work for, a small startup, worked with medical schools, right? They built software for medical schools, right? Like think Blackboard for specifically designed for medical schools, which had their own necessary requirements. One of the locations we supported, the data center was in deep in East Africa, and it was a hydroelectric powered data center by a stream. And if you know anything about like African climate and so forth, so on, you know that there are wet and dry seasons. So during the dry seasons, the stream would stop. So hydroelectricity would stop coming in to the data center. So we had to figure out ways to be able to kind of package up our automation and ship it when the thing was on, and then let it run itself even if the thing was off. So like that kind of scenario, I feel like is really this remote worker node at its best, right? Like getting that distributed computing and having that capability to be disconnected and still kind of function as a normal unit with, that limited connectivity. Like that's what I needed like 5-6 years ago now, or longer than that, probably. This was 2015. So 5 years ago. Yeah. So those scenarios happen, right? Like there are data centers in weird places, or think of like restaurants and, stores of sorts, right? Like they might have their whole POS system set up, but they need something else to run like the mobile apps or whatever, the inventory system that's being used. And just having one server in the entire store might be the whole thing, like the whole ball game. So you need to be able to have those remote use cases that can be, network segmented, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and what people come up with a lot these days is also IoT devices. They're small devices that can hook up into your network. They do a very specific function, and they need to do it well. And then you have very limited resources. I have an example here, which is
I've got examples.
which is it can be a light switch, or it can be it can open your blinds and all that. So you just connect the wires here. It works over Wi-Fi, and obviously this has to go into a socket. It's very small,
right?
And it connects to the internet, so it's theoretically also a security threat. So vendors need to update the software on these. Should update the software on these, and a very nice way to do that would obviously be containers. And then with Quay, you can automatically do a security scan on these.
Yes.
And if we can shrink down OpenShift to run in these boxes, that would be awesome.
Yeah, like that's like dream come true kind of status, right? In my opinion, because if I could all of a sudden throw IoT devices wherever I want them or need them, for example, my car, and have a kubelet or an entire, node of OpenShift running in that vehicle, and have it, collecting data from sensors inside the car and then shipping that data up to kind of the bigger data center once it got back on site where it had Wi-Fi connectivity and everything. That's a use case that I could see happening all over the place, right? Like you can get metrics from all kinds of things, right? Think about like, it's a funny story, like in the early 2000s, and they might still do it now, right? Like the way they checked, cell or mobile network connectivity was to drive around in like a big SUV or van with all these antennas on it, right? Like, what if you could do that with your entire fleet of maintenance vehicles in a Verizon or an AT&T example, right? Or, you know, T-Mobile in the EU kind of deal, and they could just have their normal fleet of repair vehicles doing that signal checking at the same time, and then when they all come back home, connects and gives you all that data automatically, as opposed to having teams of people roving around with antennas looking super suspicious, right? Like,
what we have here in Germany, and I'm saying it's a Europe-wide thing, is you can get a mobile app and you install it on your phone, and whenever you're saying you have no reception, you can tell that app, and it's just recording your GPS coordinates.
nice.
But then you have another problem, like you don't have that delay sync, that asynchronous sync. You have apps that everyone can download, and one day it might be hundreds of thousands of people, and the other day it might be hundreds of people.
Right.
And you need to scale that. Then we go back to OpenShift and how you can do auto scaling and how you can do, you scale for the workload.
Yeah. Horizontal pod autoscaler, vertical pod autoscaler, those are all things in OpenShift, and pretty cool stuff. All
and
well
OCS
documented
works
too.
very well with that, because
Yeah.
you can just add more storage workers, and with that you increase the capacity, but also the IOPS that you have available. It's too slow, you add more this, and it gets faster. And there's also something we benefit from Ceph there, because Ceph has been known to scale linearly up, and we've proven that in the object storage use case with the 10 billion object test that we did, I think 4 months ago.
10 billion?
10 billion.
That's a lot of objects. That's a lot of objects.
That was the intention. Like, we wanted to go where no other storage vendor that we know of has gone, and
Very nice.
we tested that publicly, released a white paper on that, and we could show that the performance while we added object stayed the same. And that is also because of the architecture of how Ceph is built up. We don't have any middleman, like we don't have any metadata servers in there. It's all governed by an algorithm, the crush algorithm, where the objects are placed, and thus it doesn't really matter how many objects you have in your cluster.
Yeah, let me get this link over to y'all. If you want to check out the Red Hat 10 billion thing, there's actually a special link for you. It's red.ht/10 billion. That's rather clever. Download that white paper there, and you can get an idea of like the massive scale that you can do with what is essentially open source projects that we've productized by gluing all the pieces together that you need. It's pretty awesome.
Your link hasn't appeared yet, though.
Twitch's chat API must not be cooperating today. So there you go, folks.
No, it's there.
So if you're not familiar with how we do things here on OpenShift TV, we use a service called restream.io, and it streams out to multiple services all at once, and it has its own like chat client that is supposed to send whatever I type in it to all the channels. But today, for whatever reason, Twitch is being meh. So
it's technology. You never know.
Hey, APIs change all the time, and a service that consumes those APIs has to adapt to them. So I get it. I'm not faulting Restream. It's just one of those days, they're adjusting APIs, as it were.
It's a catch-up game, and sometimes you have that, and then a couple of hours later, it
boom, it'll work.
Continues to work.
Yep. No, I would not be surprised on the next show we do here at 11 a.m. Eastern. It would just work fine, right? Literally in an hour from now. It would not surprise me at all. Anything else, man? You want to talk about?
That's pretty much it.
Cool. So I like to tell folks what's coming up next on the show or the channel. The next show is, like I said, at 11 a.m. Eastern, 1600 UTC. It is the future of OpenShift administration with our product managers and UX designers. We're going to be talking about setting up alert receivers, which is very important in OpenShift because whenever there's a bump in the night, you need to know about it. So I challenged them on a few of the receivers yesterday that, are kind of older, but I've been using for a long time, something like pushover.net, which doesn't necessarily have webhooks, so it has its own little ways of things. You might have to um, do a little bit of work prior to get that working. So yeah, it should be an interesting call or show. And then of course, everybody loves this one. It is the GitOps happy hour, which is at 3 p.m. 2000 UTC. It's always weird saying 2000. But the show today we'll be talking about sync waves and hooks in Argo CD. So yeah, if you want to get your GitOps on, come check us out here in a few hours.
And don't forget to tune in 2 weeks for the next OCS office hours, where my colleague Michelle DiPalma will be talking about object storage and a multi-cloud gateway and all the great things you can do with that.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, your questions, your engagement. Thank you so much. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out and we will catch you next time.